episode of Trans Confessions, a very queer journey. I am your host, Jynx, the Wonder Girl. My co-host Daphne can't be here with us today, so it's just going to be me flying solo, which is absolutely fine. We've got a good show for you today. Today I am continuing my celebration of my 1 year with Tranniversary. So we're going to go over a couple of things specifically related to transgender folks, some of the issues that we're currently seeing on the political realm, on the social realm, and then I'm actually going to go a little bit of a story time. So as part of that story time, I'm going to reveal a little bit more intimately about myself on my show. So to get everything kicked off, once again, viewer discretion is advised. This is an adult show. 18 and up preferred. We say things that are very trigger inducing. We have lots of triggering discussions and topics that we go over. I swear constantly, so if you are not above the age of 18, I would recommend changing the station. If you're an adult who is and you've got children in the room who are not, it's probably a good idea for you to either wear headphones or tune in later. So, we stream live during our seasons every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We're streaming on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Twitter, and occasionally TikTok as well. We do see all the comments that are coming in on all those platforms. We can see your questions. I usually will address them towards the end. If it looks like it's critical enough, I will address them right there on the spot. But please be patient, especially those on TikTok. I can't always see your comments when they go whizzing by, and I can't go back and review them later. So if you've got questions, try to hold them until the viewer Q&A section, which is usually at the end. Until then, just stay tuned. There's a lot of great information that we're going to go over, and we're going to have a lot of fun today. Now, that being said, I also have my own website. When this is over, if you didn't catch it live, you want to go back and see it again, you can go to my website. Website cyberjynx.me. You can see it right down here in the corner of the video. For those on TikTok, you cannot. I'm sorry. Just go to cyberjynx.me. You can go to the Trans Confessions page on that website, and you can watch all of these, every episode on demand, completely free of charge. It costs nothing. But while you're there, check out the merch store, check out some of the other areas. There's a lot of fun stuff that you can go and buy. Great gift ideas. If you're in the Alphabet Mafia, there's tons of stuff that's, Pride merch. It's really, really good stuff. I don't make it. Other creators make it. I just list it on my store. So you're not just helping me, you're helping them too. Again, our shows are Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 11:30 a.m. Central Time. This is the second to last episode. Episode 25, which will not be Wednesday, it'll be Friday, will be my last episode of this season. I will not be picking back up until August. That's when season 2 will kick off. And it gives me time to come up with the show's outline, guest spots, who's going to be on the show, and places we're going to actually do the show from. I would like to do my show from someplace other than my office. I'd like to go live on location one of these days. But you got to make sure you got a good internet connection. We've got all of our camera equipment set up properly, good lighting, the whole 9 yards. So, without further ado, let's go into our discussion. So, transgender questions continue to basically flood my inbox. So whether it's email, whether it's comments that come in on videos or live streams that I'm doing, and obviously what's going on in the news. A lot of these things, I'm sorry to say, should not even have to be discussed. They really shouldn't. But here we are, constantly being brought into the fray, if you will. Constantly having to basically discuss the same shit over and over and over again. So let's get to it. Being transgender is not a one-size-fits-all definition. Being transgender is different for each and every single transgender person. Now, do we share some commonality? Do we share similarities? Absolutely. Absolutely, but it's varying. It changes based on the person. It changes based on their life experience. However, today we're going to try to focus on some of those commonalities. A transgender person can be simply broken down to this. It is any person who does not identify as the gender assigned to them at birth. That's all a transgender person is. I get a lot of flack and a lot of hate, and I don't even know why. People are telling me to stop calling them cis or cisgendered because it's offensive. And I'm like, what is offensive about a scientific term for someone who does identify as the gender they were assigned at birth? That's all cisgender means. You're either cisgender or you are transgender. Two scientific terms. Pretty simple. Either you agree with the gender assigned to you at birth or you don't. I don't. I would be transgender. My wife does. She would be cisgender. It's not a slur and it's not hate speech. And yeah, I get constantly berated. I've even had videos of mine removed from certain platforms, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, because I called someone cisgender or cishet. So you are cisgendered and heterosexual. What about that is offensive? Now, if you weren't cisgendered and you're not heterosexual, okay, so I made a mistake. Then I would get it. But if you are cisgendered and you are heterosexual, then cishet is just a short way of saying you're cisgendered and you're heterosexual. It's nothing offensive. And we get berated by this all the time. But it's perfectly okay, and I really don't like it when this happens. It seems to be perfectly okay for people on multiple platforms, TikTok being the most egregious of these, to call me a tranny. Well, there's nothing scientific about the term tranny. There's nothing scientific about the term she-male, or he-she, or whatever else. Those are slurs. There's a reason there to be angry. I'm not a tranny, I'm not a she-male, I'm not a he-she. I am transgendered, or trans for short. So we're seeing a lot of this reverse psychology coming in, and where is it always coming from? Well, it comes from the same group it's always come from. So small-minded, little-wienered people who have nothing better to do than really just go around harassing people and making them feel like shit because their lives are, in fact, garbage. So what happens when someone like that, a small-minded, tiny-wienered piece of garbage, gets elected or wants to be elected to a political seat? Well, this next video is going to show you exactly what happens when you see something or when something like that actually happens. And it's far more disturbing, so trigger warnings. Trigger warnings. If you're not watching on my live stream and you're watching on TikTok, you can't see this. You might be able to hear it, but you cannot see it. I highly recommend go watch me on Twitch, go watch me on YouTube, go watch me on Facebook, basically any other platform out there besides TikTok, and you'll actually be able to see this.
Look at this piece of shit.
Swimmer Leah Thomas wins.
Come on. That's a man in a woman's bathing suit. And now, right here in Alabama, millions of your tax dollars are paying for the first transgender public school in the South. Enough of this foolishness. I'm Tim James. Male and female, he created them. It's time.
The Magic City Acceptance Center in Birmingham, where I live, was meant to be a safe space for LGBT plus youth. And that guy put these kids in a political ad. He did that with their faces. And now they've added extra security at the school. So I think we should raise a shitload of money. I put the link to their GoFundMe in my bio.
So, fuck you, Tim. That's basically what I'm going to put out there. This political idiot used his religious standpoints, one, to make fun of Leah Thomas, and two, to basically publicly out an entire school of LGBTQIA plus students, specifically showing the faces of the transgendered students from the school's archives in a political ad in Alabama. The school has now had to come up with large amounts of money, privately funded, although it is a public school, to add additional security around the school because there are now people threatening these trans kids and these LGBTQIA plus kids for using taxpayer dollars to get an education. I'm sorry, but I see a problem with that. I see a huge problem with that. And there's another issue that I'm also seeing right now, specifically with this idiot's ad. And that is, he brings up religion. He says he made these genders that way. First off, who's he? God doesn't exist. He didn't make anything. It did not make anything. We're a product of nature. And second, why are you bringing your religion and your religious convictions into politics and how we run our government? I have no problem with the faithful. I have no problem with Christians. I have no problem with the Jews. I have no problem with Muslims. I have no problem with anybody. I will fight tooth and nail and have 20 some odd years of military service for you to have the right to worship whatever sky fairy you want. I don't care. I don't care. But when you come down and talk to me or talk to people who I agree with or associate with or love and start shoving your particular sky fairy's brand of stupidity in my face and then try to pass laws making, well, my existence illegal because your sky fairy says it's bad, no. The answer is fucking no. I will not comply. We will never comply. Ever. I don't give a damn what your sky fairy says or what some white crusty old dude wrote in a book 400 years ago, or in most cases for Christianity, modern Christianity, as late as 1942. I don't fucking care. Nobody with an IQ above 7 gives a shit about what your stupid little book says. What is and is not wrong. Especially when I have read that entire book and there are so many instances of rape, sexual assault, murder, all sanctified by your sky fairy. Well, I'm sorry. I can't take you seriously. I just can't. This particular politician, in his infinite stupidity, decided he wanted to use his particular flavor of religion to publicly out marginalized students. And I'm sorry, that's awful. That is awful. Why we allow this kind of thing to continue is beyond me. I have never met a single member of the LGBT community, whether virtually or in person, who has ever forced their way of life, their belief system, anything on anyone else. Ever. Not even in Florida, where people, for whatever reason, I can't even think of why, believe that there are teachers who are members of the LGBTQIA plus society or are queer themselves, forcing their ideology on anyone. Particularly, as they like to claim in Florida, toddlers. Well, toddlers, as defined by the term toddler in the American Pediatric Association, is children between the ages of 2 and 3.5 or 4, depending on weight, capability, and cognitive, abilities. Well, we don't teach that stuff in school to anyone of those. That would be pre-K. Rest assured, I've never seen a public school system, or private for that matter, teach pre-K students about sexual orientation, preferences, gender identity, whatever. But you know what? I've never seen it for children who are kindergarten through 3rd grade, or 3rd grade through 8th grade, or 9th grade through high school. These are generally elective courses in most school systems, usually. It does almost in every school, whether it's a Democrat-run state or a Republican-run state. still require parental identification and consent. So it makes no sense. Most of these laws are specifically created to be ambiguous, to leave very, very important things out, like, I don't know, definitions to stuff, because they're designed to target people they don't like. That is what these are for. Forcing gender roles onto people has been something that society, particularly those in power in society, have done to keep control over people. That's what they do. Gender is not so cut and dry. There's no such thing as just purely male and purely female. And just because you don't identify as either of those two things does not necessarily mean you fall in between those two, because that is the very antithesis of pitting each other against each other. It is not man versus woman. It has never been man versus woman. We are all human beings. So this next video goes very, very well into it. It is a great content provider and creator, also on TikTok, that I enjoy listening to. They use a very, very concise language that makes, well, what they're saying much easier to follow. So please enjoy this next bit with me, and we'll discuss a little bit.
I want to clarify something. I am not in between man and woman. That would insinuate that man opposes woman, and that's simply not true. Gender isn't linear. It is infinite. All of these identities, terms, and forms of expression don't exist in a clean, straight line. They all exist separately, floating in the ether in this amorphous entity that is gender. Our society has minimized all of this infinity into two clean, separate, and opposing boxes in an attempt to control the chaos. But this way of thinking is keeping people from their truest selves. We have normalized following the rules over following our truth. And when our truth doesn't fall in line with the rules, we are made to feel less than. They can try to minimize us, but human beings cannot be contained in this way because we don't exist in this way. You cannot contain infinity. So let's embrace the chaos, because what we got going on now is causing a whole lot of suffering. I love you.
They are an amazing creator. They are. So they consider themselves non-binary. Non-binary, feminine presenting. That's one of thousands of self-expression identities that people can have. And they make a very good point. Gender is not linear. It doesn't exist on a line. It doesn't even exist on an escalating line. It is infinite and it's all directions. People can identify in a myriad of different ways and be perfectly content and happy. The issue that you see is often people who get upset about this are just confused. They're angry because they don't get it. They're angry because they don't want to get it. Change is bad. Change is scary. Sure, we get it. We get it. Throughout the annals of history of humankind, people have been terrified of change to the point of being quite violent. Wars were fought over trying to avoid change. Well, here's what history also proves. Whether you like it or not, change happens. You will lose the war. We always do. But how much innocence is lost in the process? How many people have to die before people just leave everyone else alone? It's an awful question to ask. It's one I wish there was an easier way to answer, because I don't know. I wish I did. Many of the things that we're seeing are just sheerly out of ignorance and fear. That's all it is. When you see people get angry at, let's say, I don't know, a non-binary person and scream, oh, I'm not going to use they, them pronouns because that doesn't make sense. That violates English. Well, English scholars have already proven that you're wrong. It is common and quite acceptable to use they and them to refer to a singular person, and has been for eons. For as long as the English language has existed, this has been used that way. Even Shakespeare referred to single entities, people, as they or them. We do it all the time. Non-binary people don't feel comfortable being referred to as he or him or she or her. They are merely asking that you don't do that and refer to them as they and them. So, to throw a hissy fit like a small child, a big crying baby, about having to use they them pronouns for someone, regardless of how they present, whether they're presenting masculine, presenting feminine, or truly androgynous, where you just don't know, is that a woman? Is that a man? The better question to ask yourself is it any of your damn business? No, it's not. It's not your business at all. Parents, it's none of your business either, even if it is your child. Your child is an individual human being, just like you. That child wants to identify as something other than what you continue to call your child. Tough. I'm sorry, but if you thought you had a boy and that boy identifies as a girl, you don't have a boy, you have a girl. And it's quite that cut and dry. It really is. And yet we want to have this large, focused argument. We want to bring it to the political stage, the national, and now the global stage. I'm going to put an overlay on top of my screen to show you just how ridiculous this has become. Now, these are just in 2022. Just 2022. The anti-transgender bills in each state legislature. So we've got them in Maine, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Iowa, South Dakota, Minnesota, North Dakota, and Montana. Every single one of these bills. Oh wait, I'm sorry, I left out Alaska and Hawaii. Alaska and Hawaii too. Sorry. Every single one of these bills, I had to go look just to make sure I was not going to misquote any of this, all brought up and presented in those states by the conservative or Republican politicians who were elected. This is not a left versus right issue. And this is not the hill the Republicans are going to die on. It's not. Because they're not going to win. They're not. I don't care how boisterous, how much money they throw at this. It's never going to happen. These are wasted tax dollars. And that's the real reason. That's the real reason why these bills are being presented in the first place. It is an opportunity to spend billions of taxpayer money on useless pet projects of the elitist oligarchs that are actually in control of your state. And any Republican voting person that says otherwise, I'm not a Californian, I'm from Texas. Any Republican that says otherwise is either deluding themselves or they're about as awful as the Nazis were when they were trying to convince their constituents, their voter stock, that what they were doing was also acceptable. I don't compare people to Nazi Germany very often, but when you see specific bills just like these being targeted to a very specific marginalized group of people, apples and apples, folks, because that's what this boils down to. My bra strap is falling. That's what you're seeing. Now, some of these states have passed significantly more than others. So Georgia has proposed and not passed any yet. 5. They won't even make it past the Senate. Never going to happen. Florida passed the so aptly named Don't Say Gay bill. But they've got 12 more that they're trying. All of them very ambiguous. All of them lack definition. Every single one of them specifically designed to target trans people, and more importantly, gay men. They're not really going after, because of the way these bills are written, lesbians or bi people, weirdly enough. But they definitely are going after transgendered people, all forms of transgendered people, specifically non-binary, and gay men. Now, this is disturbing on a level I have never seen in my lifetime. TikTok 143, I saw your question. I will address it later. So, the issue that I'm seeing in this particular case, and the fervency by which we're seeing it occur, has nothing to do with conservative politics. It has nothing to do with the GOP as a party in a sense of itself. And truth be told, it doesn't have a lot to do with Christianity, because here's the thing. I know hundreds of people who would classify themselves as one form of Christian or another. Whether those are Catholics, Methodists, Lutherans, Baptists, Southern Baptists, or non-denominational. The vast majority of those people that I know who identify as Christians are very good, very lovely, very happy, and very spiritual people. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I really do. Again, I would fight for their right to worship whatever sky fairy they choose. And even those folks are appalled at some of the things going on within the party that they vote for. Well, here's the thing, and this is the issue I do take with them. If you have such a problem with people who are standing in your faith's shadow, claiming that they are allowed to do all of these things because your faith says so, why haven't you done anything about it? It's a simple question. It would require a very simple answer. And yet, this confuses them. Well, what do you mean? What am I supposed to do about it? I was like, I don't know. Stop voting for the idiots that claim these things. Stop voting for the people that use your religion as permission to essentially destroy an entire community of marginalized people. I mean, hell, we as a country have been doing it to people of color and indigenous folks, well, fuck, forever. So I ask them that often, and I don't understand why they can't give an answer. My answer would be pretty simple. Now, I have never voted Democrat, and I have never voted Republican because I despise both of those political ideologies. They're useless. The Republican Party hasn't been useful since pre-1913. I mean, let's be honest. They haven't. Again, folks, if you can, hold most of your questions till towards the end of the show. I do thank you for joining. I do thank you for listening. I will answer your questions during the Q&A portion. For those who are on TikTok, hold your questions, because I definitely will not see your question, because they will whiz by and then they're gone in the ether forever. Now, this next content creator I follow a lot. Love the stuff they create, and this particular one makes some pretty good points. Again, focusing around some of the just ridiculous issues that we as transgender folks have to face all of the time. So have a listen, decide for yourself.
Today I learned that the word liberal apparently means something very different in Australia. What in the ever-loving fuck is this? Go read that title a few times. This person, Catherine Devs, is not comparing what is happening to trans people around the world to what happened to the Jewish people in Europe in the 30s and the 40s. No, she's comparing anti-trans cis people to the victims of that atrocity, specifically when talking about girls' sports. Oh, I'd never be the villagers that stayed quiet while the trains went past, or whatever. So no, the tiny marginalized group that's having hundreds of laws written against them, being banned and segregated from daily life, being demonized everywhere you look, being discriminated against, assaulted, murdered, those are the people who are the Yahtzees. The projection's so big she could start an IMAX theater.
Yeah. So that is an Australian politician slash activist. And I read the article and I was like, wow. But yes, I mean, they did make a good point. Liberal does mean something quite different in Great Britain and in Australia. Wow. Someone ban Ethan. Disgusting. Ouch. It does mean something different in those countries. And I don't think it's quite right to compare cisgendered anti-trans activists to the people who were basically receiving the brunt end of all of the horrible atrocities during World War II. That's just disgusting. Hold on, I'm going to take a second to block these two morons there. If you guys come in and say things like whatever Ethan just said, you're going to get blocked, and then I'm going to have your accounts banned off of TikTok permanently. So, and if you think I can't, try me. Now, going on to that, sitting there saying, and this is, again, one of those hills that the Republicans and conservative mindsets want to die on, and that is transgendered people in sports, whether they're college sports, high school sports, professional sports, it doesn't seem to matter. They are just up in fucking arms over trans people competing in sports. We saw it in the first video where the politician from Alabama is like, that's not a, that's disgusting. That's just a man in a woman's bathing suit. Fuck you. That's basically what that boils down to. So I get asked all the time as a transgender person, what are my opinions or what do I think about trans people competing in professional sports? And I said, what's the fucking question? Like, what's the real question? Because if you're talking about what's the deal? Women competing against women, men competing against men, or is your issue taken with non-binary people? Well, to date, I've only known one non-binary person, at least in the professional sports realm, to compete. And they stayed competing in the gendered sports that they were assigned at birth. Because that's where they wanted to go. Now, if you're going to come at me about, well, trans women shouldn't be competing against biological women, I'm going to stop you right there. One, stop comparing trans women to biological women. Women are women, period. And the question that you're asking, the real question, isn't involving whether or not trans women should compete openly with women, because you've answered your own question. They're women. Women can compete against women. So this next creator, although I just recently discovered him, makes a very good point. So I'm going to bring this one up for your guys' viewing and listening pleasure. And they do a fantastic job. They really do, of breaking down the reality of what this actually means, what these questions really are. So take a listen.
In my mind, this whole issue is a scientific and technological question that is being deliberately and unnecessarily entwined with a moral inclusion issue. Now let's ask the simple question: should women be allowed to compete with women? I think the answer is yes. Now there's two sides to the legitimate discussion about how exactly you go about making sure that you correct for the biological advantage of having higher testosterone. One is the hormone levels at the time of competition, and the other one is the lasting advantage. The lasting advantage being the more complicated of those two factors if you're looking at somebody who is transitioning later in life and has already had the benefit of that testosterone for training and competing for a longer period of time. But testing for those hormone levels and quantifying that lasting advantage and being able to set parameters for fair competition is a scientific and technological question. But the thing is, if people actually only cared about the integrity of women's sports and fair competition, that would be the only question they'd be asking. Yes, they should be included, but how do we make sure it's fair? What people are saying is, no, it's not fair. No, it can never be fair. We should ban them. That's very different. Because by that same logic, those people should be supporting lifetime irreversible bans for anybody caught using steroids. Because if somebody fails a drug test, all you know for sure is that they took drugs once. You don't know how long they've been on them, how many tests they beat beforehand, how much training they did with that added benefit, and how many competitions they won. But that's not what happens. They get caught, they pay a fine, they serve a suspension, sometimes not even a long one, and then they're allowed to return to competition, sometimes with added scrutiny, sometimes not. I've seen fighters fail drug tests and come back to competition multiple times in their career. Now, I'm sure there are purists out there that would say, yes, we should be putting a lifetime irreversible ban on anybody that gets caught using steroids. But are they making as much noise as the people calling for transgender bans? I'll tell you one thing I know for sure, 34 US states didn't introduce steroid user lifetime ban bills last year. I think that the issue of fair competition in women's sports is a weapon that they are wielding against the transgender community. By saying you can't compete in women's sports because it's not fair and it will never be fair no matter how much science advances, what they're really saying without having to say it out loud is, we don't consider you a woman and we will never consider you a woman.
There you have it. There's the real issue at hand. That's the real question. The people who are out there protesting transgender women competing in sports, and mind you, just transgendered women competing in sports, are the same small-minded, little-wienered, no-brained, low-IQ'd, trailer-living garbage that would also get angry if they went on a date, found a trans woman attractive, and then probably would beat her to death once they found out. He makes the best statement right there at the very end, because they will never see transgender women as women, and that's why they don't want them competing in sports. I have never seen anyone talk about transgendered men competing in men's sports, and there's a lot of them. They talk about men going down there and competing in women's sports for the distinct advantage. The distinct advantage of what? Of what? What does a man have to gain, particularly in the college or professional sports level of any sport, by going down into the women's league? What? Earning not even one, less than 1% of their male counterparts in professional sports? How about the constant mockery that women's sports get? Or the lack of advertising dollars and publicity? Or the rampant sexual assault and abuse amongst female athletes and their owners, coaches? Is that the advantage that they're going after? Doesn't sound like much of a fucking advantage to me. So you're telling me I'm going to get less than 1% of a male counterpart doing the exact same sport for the exact same number of years with the exact same skill set? Gotcha. I have a 86% likelihood of being sexually assaulted while playing in women's sports. Awesome. Oh, and everyone's going to make fun of me, and then no one's going to come watch my fucking sports anyway. Great. Sounds like a really good reason to dress up like a woman and then go compete in women's sports. No, assholes. They're just athletes. They're athletes who want to compete. And they just happen to be transgender women. And just because they're transgender women does not give you or anybody else the right to tell them they don't get to compete anymore because, oh, I'm sorry, you have an advantage. Now, this particular viewer did come in and show what those two things are. Hormone levels at the time the competition exists and predispositioned advantages for having said hormones prior for the number of years they were able to have said advantage. Both things need to be accounted for, and I personally agree with that. I think that that is the perfect way to do it. Now, if you're someone who's like me, I lived in the wrong body following the assigned gender I was given for the vast majority of my life. Now, that being said, I've been on hormones, as we're celebrating on my show today, for 1 year. Now, everyone who knows me personally, and for those who've been following me for quite some time, also understand that I was in the military. Now, the military has standards too. The military has standards, and those standards are in fact gendered. I competed and did everything I was supposed to do for my 20 years of combat military service following male standards, and did so just fine. Now, since I've begun my transition on my hormones, meeting those standards has become virtually impossible. I cannot run anywhere near as fast as I used to, despite still working out. So yes, hormones do create a distinctive disadvantage, and vice versa. For those who are transitioning male, it creates a distinct advantage. Muscle definition changes, fat distribution changes, lung capacity, height, all change. These are things that should have to be tested for. I completely agree with that. I completely agree with that. And the hard one is going to be, specifically, predetermined advantage. So if you're a 25-year-old transgendered female competing in sports, you do have a pretty distinct predetermined advantage. But you're not going to have it very long. Now the question is, how do you take that predetermined advantage compared with current hormone levels and make a fair decision on competition? User 496 says trans women should compete in men's sports. So basically you're just saying that women should be allowed to compete against men openly in sports. All right. Fine. But it has to be all the way around, or you're just a goddamn hypocrite. Because that's really what we're trying to boil this down to. This is all about hypocrisy. That's all it is. Just like the gentleman in the video stated, we don't see all these people out there clamoring as loudly for permanent sport bans for people who abuse drugs or other hormones, for that matter. We don't see anybody doing that. Hell, I haven't seen anyone calling for the Major Baseball, league to ban all these idiots who were juicing. For decades they were juicing and getting away with it. You know what? They're still fucking playing. They're still playing. Where's the call to have them removed permanently from sports? I don't see state legislators trying to remove all these sports officials and shit like that from the Hall of Fame. Known juicers and drug users. Because at the end of the day, they might get fined. They might even get a couple of freaking games of suspension. Their ass is right back on the field out there making multi-millions of dollars and funneling it through their state's legislator via taxes within the same month. I mean, let's be honest here. Let's be honest. You know why they're getting away with the bans on transgender female athletes? Is because nobody watches women's sports. Nobody up until now ever gave a fuck about women's sports. Let's be honest. Nobody. Not a damn person ever gave two shits about women playing in professional sports. Nobody. And because it makes no money, because there's very little money that flows through those organizations, that means there's no legislators getting kickbacks on the fucking side through tax incentives. So legislators have no reason to protect those people. So when a bunch of evangelical shitbags want to walk in there and talk about, hey, it's wrong for trans women to fucking play in sports, well, politicians have no money to protect those people. So it's like, well, yeah, let's go out there and hang these people out to dry. And that's what you're seeing. That's exactly what you're seeing. User, you're ignorant. And if you make one more statement, I'm going to kick you. Be quiet until the end of my show. Then you can use that time to spew your filth, all right? Till then, shut up. You're on my show now. It's very, very common for ignorant, small-minded people to make blasphemous statements. Not by blasphemous that you're speaking out against God. Blasphemous, and it's just ignorance and stupidity for the sheer sake of being ignorant and stupid. That's all it is. That's literally the definition of a troll. People who say incendiary comments for the sake of saying incendiary comments. However, they give me good fodder to speak on, so I guess I can't be too fucking mad at them. Now, of course, this next topic that's going to come up is one that I thought we were finally putting to bed, and yet it's back in the fucking news. 9 more states have now tried to pass legislation essentially passing genital checks for women's restrooms. Yes, genital checks for women's restrooms. So this next content creator I also follow, and she makes a very, very, very good point. So take a listen. Again, decide for yourself.
Just imagine putting me in the men's bathroom because I'm a trans woman. The idea that men are going to dress up like women and hide in the women's bathroom and do horrid things to women is just so ridiculous. Like the idea of me putting me in the men's bathroom? You know what's much more likely to happen than a trans woman doing anything to someone in the women's bathroom? A man doing bad things to trans women in the male bathroom. Men are literally responsible of 90% of sexual violence against women and 93% of the sexual violence against other men. A transgender woman statistically has about a 50% chance of being sexually assaulted in their lifetime. You need to reevaluate why you think that I should be in the men's bathroom, because it actually has nothing to do with the idea of protecting young girls and everything to do with the fact that you're transphobic and you don't think that my identity is real. So stop hiding behind fake violence. Men are the real problem.
She makes a very, very good point. I went and looked up some of the same statistics, and then I correlated them across other research tables, Pew and everything else, that have gone out there over the last 35 years and tabulated in much more detail what she was trying to elaborate on. So I looked in every state. I spent 5 days trying to find some example anywhere in the United States, anywhere, where a transgendered woman went into the women's restroom and sexually or physically assaulted anybody. Not just children, anybody. I looked. I researched everywhere. Everywhere. And I have not been able to find a single case. Ever. Since they started recording it. So where the fuck do all these laws keep coming from? How are we out there screaming we need to protect children and we need to protect little girls in the girls' room when there's been literally no case? Now, here's what I did find. I found one case. I found one case where a known pervert did sneak into a women's room, hid in the women's stall, and sexually assaulted a young woman, obviously underage. That is the only case I found. Now, this person, only after going through the courts and basically being told, you're going to spend the rest of your life behind bars, because this was not this person's first time creating such offenses, then, and only then, did the defense come out for this particular person that they were trans. One. I found one. Now, after going through psychological evaluations, through the courts, and through a private insurance donated psychotherapist, this person was determined as not being trans, not having gender dysphoria, and just basically a pervert. The only thing that the Republican Party, the GOP, and the ultra-conservatives might actually have as an argument against this one case is not because this person was trans. The doctors all proved that they weren't trans. It's just a perverted, gross old man. Was they just happened to be on the staff for the Democratic, state convention where this occurred. That's the only damn thing the GOP might have on this person. Once. So why are all these laws coming out trying to stop women from peeing in the women's room? And now you've got states who are passing laws that if you go to use public restrooms in public domain areas by state law, you must submit to random genital checks. That's right, ladies. The state's trying to pass laws to sexually assault you under the guise of protecting children. So that's really what it's all about. Just more crusty old white men passing laws to make it easier to get into your pants. That's really what it boils down to. But here's the thing. I'm going to use the women's room, and I don't give a shit how many people it pisses off. I don't give a shit how many people it pisses off. And you know what? There have been enough idiots, small-brained, potato IQ'd idiots in the state of Texas who have tried to physically stop me from using the women's restroom. Because they're being encouraged to do so by the talking heads on TV and the politicians who are basically making it illegal to assault people. Here's what those several people have learned quite quickly in Texas when they attempted to do that. The first person touched me on my shoulder and said, "Listen, dude, you're not going in there. I will stop you." That guy got 2 eyes and a mouthful of mace. Quite quickly, and I still went and used the fucking bathroom while he cried like a small little child on the floor. And when I came out of that bathroom and he was able to come to a little bit, I maced him again, just for good measure. The second asshat that tried to stop me was in a Walmart. He got tased. And I left the taser on and went in and used the bathroom. The best thing, whether you're conservative, evangelical, left, it doesn't really matter. The best thing you as a human being can do is shut your mouth and mind your business. The price for not doing so, my friends, as I have proven here in Texas and legally got away with, is steep. Mace is not fun. Hell, my eyes burned after I sprayed it, and I wasn't even in the cloud. I can't imagine what that dingbat felt like writhing on the floor. And you know what? The two men that I tased for basically physically assaulting me for using the women's room paid their pants. So, mild satisfaction. So keep it up. The best thing is, leave us the fuck alone. There's no proof anywhere in society as a whole that a transgender woman or a transgender man is going to do anything anywhere in the bathroom to assault or hurt another woman, and especially a child. Now, that being said, I also went through all of this different research, and they are absolutely accurate within 0.05% on the numbers that she explained. Trans women who are forced to use the men's room have a 51.9968% likelihood of being sexually assaulted or raped by a white cisgendered man in the bathroom if they're forced to use the men's room. I mean, come on. 85% of all rapes and sexual assaults against women in general are committed by white cisgender men. 95.5% of all sexual assaults against men are committed by white cisgender men. So who's the real problem here? It's not transgendered women. Sounds an awful like, well, white dudes seem to be the biggest issue. It's awful, folks. It is. It's disgusting. I'm really tired of defending my position because my position is very simple. And it's this. If you ask me, should transgendered women be allowed to use the women's room, my position and answer is quite simple. Fuck you. Mind your business. Transgender people owe you nothing. They owe you no explanation. They owe you no reasons why. But if you absolutely need to have a reason why should a transgender woman use the women's room, well, one, they're a woman. And two, everyone has the right to pee. That's all they're doing when they go in that room. And possibly touching up their makeup. Maybe. Leave people the fuck alone. I don't think that's a complicated thing to ask someone to do. I don't go pry my fucking life into someone else's and be like, hey, you need to go in here. There is no opportunity to see anything they don't already have, Charlie Green. Opportunity to see what? Because honestly, only a perv like you would come in here and make that assumption. Maybe you need to check yourself and look at why that's the first conclusion you jumped to. And that's the reality of it. The people who are the angriest and making the loudest assumptions on national TV are the same perverts that would do exactly what they're blaming on other people to do. The Ben Shapiros of the world are the same exact people that would go into the opposite gender's bathroom to get a peek. But if I were, a tiny little wienered man like that, yeah, whatever opportunity I could get. Let's be honest. I think that's a good segue. So we're going to go into my section, and that's, I'm going to start tearing apart some very popular conservative talking heads that are making a lot of waves in our universities, that are making a lot of waves on national TV, they're making a lot of waves in the news. And that is, we're going to look at Ben Shapiro. Now, this next content creator is a teacher, a scientist, and someone who's genuinely interested in learning about what a lot of these people have to say. For academic purposes, of course. And one of the places this person got a chance to go and see happened to be hosting Ben Shapiro. So this is a bit long, but please stay with me.
Ben Shapiro came and spoke at the university where I teach. And I'm not a supporter of Mr. Shapiro, but I went to the event because I am an academic that studies ideological discourse in mass media. And events like this are interesting cultural artifacts that I think are worth close examination. The event went as you would expect if you're familiar with his work. He spent the first half attempting to delegitimize the experiences and identities of trans people, and then the second half of the event, he was fielding questions from the audience. And all throughout it, he took pot shots at the various marginalized groups like the LGBTQ community, as well as at particular political figures, all of which was like putting on a show, and when the audience wanted blood, he gave it to them. There were a couple of things that he said that really bothered me beyond his anti-trans, anti-queer sophistry. And I think these are really good examples of red flags to look out for when it comes to public figures. So the first red flag is that he leverages the pain and suffering of other people for political points. Specifically, he talked a lot about rates of self-harm, about rates of potentially taking one's own life that occurs within trans and queer communities. And he uses that in his attack against ideological leftism and liberals and that kind of thing. At no point did he express actual concern for the folks that he's talking about, people who are suffering. Not
I'm going to pause him right there. This gentleman points out something I've been trying to point out for years, even before I came out publicly and more openly. Because rest assured, I watch people like Ben Shapiro too. Because I need to know what the opposition is saying against my community and against me. I also watch Steven Crowder. I watch a lot of conservative or ultra-conservative evangelical people, especially their political figures, when they speak. I think it's important that all people watch all opposing sides to their own view so that we all have a better understanding of where this hate actually comes from. He hits the nail on the head. Every single show I have ever watched Ben Shapiro do on his podcast or live for students at universities boils down into 3 sections. Always the same 3. It's never any different, ever. It is no different than watching the Maury Povich show. It's basically Maury Povich for Republicans. He always begins every single segment bashing trans people, outing them, basically doxing them if they show up to one of his shows. Look, there's one right there. How delightfully appropriate. Marginalizing them even further, and then goes into political tirades. So that's section 2. Section 2 is the political tirade, and how it is the Democrats and liberals' fault for putting the ideas of gender identity into our heads in the first place, and then goes into finite details about the scientific numbers from the crime reports that show that transgender people have a high suicidal ideation and then a high suicide commitment rate. Now, if you look at the crime labs and you look at their overall statistical numbers, Ben Shapiro would be correct. Pre-affirming care, transgender people have about a 60% or higher suicide success rate. That is very high. Now notice, even the crime lab shows this is pre-gender affirming care. That's pretty high. I'm not going to lie. Now, post-gender affirming care, it's still about 40%. So I would propose this to Mr. Shapiro and anybody else who's listening or watching. Why? Why? Now, when I went through the crime reports and everything else that show these statistical numbers across the United States, many of the cases that they are actually looking at are considered undecided. The DA or the ME classified the transgender person's death as suicide under mysterious circumstances. What the fuck is that? And then I thought about it. Mysterious circumstances is state legal speak for this probably wasn't a suicide, but we have no fucking idea what caused the death, so we're going to call it a suicide just because they're trans. So chances are the successful suicide rates are probably much, much lower, both pre and post transition confirming care, and that it's not suicide at all. It's homicide or murder, particularly those post-gender confirming care. Because this actually goes to another argument that we'll touch base on probably in another episode, but this whole I have to tell my partner I'm trans. No. But I've met quite a few that have, and they have the bruises to show why telling people that you're trans beforehand is a bad idea. Now, we'll continue watching this gentleman.
Not only did he not offer any solutions for the people that he claims are being exploited by the left, he also took the opportunity to bash the Trevor Project, which is a valuable resource. If you're not familiar, it is a harm prevention hotline that is very useful for struggling queer youth. To me, what makes this particularly insidious is that easily 95% of the people were there to support him. And there were a lot of young people in this audience, many of whom at some point will likely struggle with their sexual orientation or gender identity or any of those things. And he just delegitimized a very valuable resource for them. And that has real implications. The second red flag is that he moves the goalpost for what constitutes legitimate expertise. Throughout his anti-trans speech, Shapiro used a lot of information from biology to support his points. Later on, when people were asking questions from the audience, someone who identified himself as a mathematician and a physicist pushed back on his use of biology and made some counterpoints. Ben argued back and then dismissed him as not being a biologist, which is interesting because Ben Shapiro is not a biologist. Later on, someone from the audience asked him about the climate crisis, and Shapiro argued against the idea of the climate crisis because he said that he had seen the reports from the International Panel on Climate Change and that he had some real concerns and critiques of their methodologies, which is entirely inappropriate because Shapiro is not a climate scientist. It is well and good to use information from experts to come to informed conclusions, but to elevate yourself to the status of being able to evaluate methodologies that you are not formally trained in is irresponsible. So if you see a public figure that has these two red flags, seek a better source of information.
So the gentleman makes a lot of good points. A lot of good points. And this is really what this boils down to now. And just like I said, things I discovered a very long time ago. Ben Shapiro has the same platform that he runs every single show he does. It's I'm going to go ahead and use my political clout and my fame to besmirch marginalized communities. He does it to people of color, he does it to the transgender community, and he does it to the LGBTQIA plus community as a whole very, very frequently. That we are the dregs on society, and the only reason that we exist or continue to exist is because one, conservatives are not doing enough to stop and silence us, and two, liberals are forcing us to exist by manipulating our minds into thinking that, oh, transgender is just a fad, and it's this wonderful thing where I'm going to be so cool and accepted. It's not a fucking fad. And rest assured, I don't feel cool, and I am definitely not accepted. I didn't choose to be transgendered. No amount of liberal frickin' news ever made me feel like trans was the way to go. I just am. As we all are in the trans community. We didn't wake up one day and be like, oh fuck, I'm trans. No, that's not how it works. We might have a moment of self-realization where we wake up and accept what we are rather than continuing to force a lie onto other people. Because honestly, when I presented male, that was the lie. That was the mask. That was the fake. That wasn't me. It's what I thought society and my parents and my friends wanted me to be. Best acting I've ever done. And that is the truth of it. Now, I'll hand it to Ben Shapiro, and that when he's out there making his belligerent hypocrite freaking tirades against the trans and gay communities, and more particular against black trans and gay communities, he does so in a relatively civil manner. He doesn't stoop to dirty jokes. He doesn't stoop to foul language. He doesn't stoop to just plain old making fun of people. So, Ben Shapiro, for that, I'll give you the coveted POB. Congratulations, you're not a complete piece of shit. You're just a partial one. Now, when it comes to the next person I'm going to talk about, someone else I also watch, this is Dave Landau. Now, if you don't know who Dave Landau is a comedian. Not a super good one, but a comedian nonetheless. Now, I've heard a lot of arguments, whether it's Joe Rogan out there talking on his stupid-ass podcast, or other conservative / even libertarian talking heads about the importance of maintaining the freedom of speech and the importance of allowing comedians to be comedians. You know what? I completely agree. I love the freedom of speech. It gives me the ability to do what I'm doing right now. However, there are certain things that, I don't know, maybe you need to spend more time self-checking when you have things to say. So I'm going to play a quick video. This person got to this article before I did, and I feel really bad. Because this is disgusting. What we're about to talk about here. So listen in real quick. Y'all make decisions for yourself.
Not only are conservatives never allowed to claim that they care about children anymore, but they cannot make it any more obvious that they are just very distinctly not the good guys. Elijah Schaffer and Dave Landau went into detail joking about trafficking and murdering transgender children. They even went so far as to compare it to the Trail of Tears. And this was on Blaze TV, which is an extremely far-right media company, which means that every step of the way, a conservative saw this and approved it.
I didn't believe this person at first. Now, I have heard Dave Landau in some of his comedy stand-ups. I've heard him specifically as Steven Crowder's heterosexual side piece. Most of his stuff is crude at best. But I will say this, it's also generally harmless. Usually. They can get a little spicy at times, and they've definitely said some things that have made me feel attacked or threatened, but I don't generally get pissy about a comedian. Now, I had to go read the transcripts from this show on The Blaze just to see how bad what they were talking about ended up being. And I'm not going to lie, during the time I read the transcript, the discussion between Dave Landau and his other comedian cohort on this show, I had a very difficult time holding back tears. I had a very difficult time not puking in my own mouth. That's not comedy. Dave Landau, if by some weird, obscure chance that you see my fucking podcast and you see my face, the bullshit that you guys were running back and forth with on that show, and Blaze TV, fuck you for airing it. As a libertarian news organization, not a conservative one, you should be fucking ashamed. Because that wasn't comedy and that wasn't free speech. That was disgusting. That was disgusting. They made jokes specifically asking each other, hey, in the effort to cleanse the planet of this problem, how many trans kids did you murder today? Oh, I got 6 and they came with a toll tag. Because they live here in Austin. Really? All under the guise of comedy. Comedy should be protected under free speech. Sure, funny fucking comedy should. There's nothing funny about that. Nothing appropriate, nothing nice, nothing even normal about that conversation. It was 2 sadistic, white, crusty fuckers talking about murdering kids because they're different. Well, I remember reading in history class about somebody else that did that. We should not be having this kind of conversation still. This should not be a continuing conversation. And for the life of me, I don't understand why we still have to have this conversation. Talking about murdering people, even as comedy, is not appropriate. It's not free speech. You're just a piece of shit. And for whatever reason, I may have thought, Dave Landau, you were funny at any point in history that I've seen you. Yeah, that is gone. Whatever humor I thought you had went straight out the fucking window. Now, the minute amount of respect that I still have for Steve Crowder and his show Louder with Crowder, if you are on his show ever again, I will come down to Austin and I will protest outside your fucking studio. And we will call you exactly what you are, a murderer. And I'm sorry, that person, they make a very good point. Conservatives, based on that bullshit alone, are never allowed to say that they're for protecting children ever again. Because yes, after that comedic tirade on Blaze TV, you are clearly the bad ones. That would equate to me going around talking about killing cis kids or straight kids, because they're weird. And I never would do that. Why would any sane human being even have that kind of thought in their head? Oh wait, they don't. Sane human beings don't think about shit like that. Sane human beings don't have to make claims that we've got to eradicate the weirdos. They don't joke about it either. History has already shown that we've gone through this before, with devastating consequences. But at the end of the day, the same people who make jokes about that shit also don't believe the Holocaust happened, and that the earth is flat, and that their particular flavor of Sky Fairy is going to come down and smite us all because, we're evil. Well, I'm still fucking here, so maybe it's not true. And these are also the same people that claim that we're the sexual predators, that us transgendered people are the real problem. Well, let's review that real quick before I go into my last segments, which is story time and Q&A from my viewers. So let's see, we got professional, conservative, borderline evangelical talking piece, Matt Gaetz. Well, Matt Gaetz is under serious federal investigation. You know, Mr. Republican, we need to protect the kids, for sex trafficking. Children. Well, I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound like it's protecting kids. That kind of sounds like that they're extorting them. Several Minnesota Republican officials have been arrested and are currently being investigated for the Lazaro sex trafficking charges. You know, the ones that call us trans people, the sex perverts. Absolutely. Let's not even get started with Hastert. Again, another staunch conservative talking head and politician charged with sexual assault and abuse. And what's really sad, amongst the idiots like Matt Gaetz, Hastert, all these state Republican senators, you know, who have child prostitution charges, that's a personal favorite of mine, sexual assault, raping people, grooming children for marriage, that's another favorite. Don't get me started on the Republican bill in Tennessee to make common law marriage a thing, but only amongst men and women. Oh, and then for the first 6 months it was being proposed, pushing to remove the age limit. So now, you know, our crusty white Republican friends not only don't have to go to a justice of the peace or any officiating government body or anybody for that matter to get married to, you know, whomever they want, so long as it's a heterosexual marriage, but now they don't have to go through all the hoops and shit of marrying a 13-year-old. Because apparently that's absolutely necessary in Tennessee. Thankfully, they took that provision out of the fucking bill before it passed. But it was still there anyway. Not one person who votes independent, libertarian, or Democrat in this case, supported that fucking bill. But the majority of the Republicans and the GOP did. But I'm the pervert. I'm the sexual predator. No. The answer is no. This is haters being haters. That's all it is. And it's disgusting. And I'm getting awfully tired of conservative evangelical child rapists telling me I'm the problem. So let's go into story time. As I am now celebrating my 1-year Tranniversary, I'm going to ask that my moderators on all of my platforms stop muting people. Even the dumbass ones that come in and run their mouth, the more they do that, the more other people will come in. They're not hurting my feelings, I promise, and I appreciate your efforts, okay? They're not going to bother me because people that have an IQ less than that of this sticker are not going to get to live rent-free in my brain. Now, I know who the mods are. I only have 2. Ow! So as far as story time is concerned, I will incorporate story time with Q&A. If you've got a question, if you've got a comment, go ahead and raise them on YouTube, raise them on Twitch, whatever platform you are watching. So Big Timey asks, why do I hate on evangelicals? Because evangelicals are not real. They're not a real religion. And they're not even Christians. It's a political, militant arm designed to use the Bible as a weapon. That's why I don't like them. And I don't hate anybody, Big Timey. I never have. Hate is a very strong word and one I don't like. I was born in upstate New York. It's not my opinion, it's fact. There's literal written evidence, Big Timey, proving it. The people who started the evangelical movement, those mega churches you see springing up everywhere, admitted they weren't Christians or biblical. They weren't even religious. They were a political movement. Do some research. I was born and raised in a relatively old-fashioned family, but still modern enough that we embraced change. Living in upstate New York, when most people don't realize this, is not like living in New York City. It's not like an ultra-liberal place like the city is. And despite the fact people will never believe me, there are rednecks. There are rednecks that live in New York. And you're going to find them in the upstate area. My childhood was not terrible. I would say, as a Gen Xer, my childhood is pretty on par. Well, hell, anybody else? I think I knew something was amiss around the age of 8 or 9. I always had an aversion to what most people would equate to more feminine things. My mom and dad, for the most part, ignored it. I don't think they really cared. They probably just thought I was weird. I've had a lot of experiences over the years that were very affirming. I joined the military after I did 1 year of college. For those people who've been in my more intimate shows, they know why I joined the military and did not stay in college. Sorry, I got it's really dry in here. Throughout this year, I've had a chance to reflect. I've had a chance to reflect on everything. Excuse me. I'm going to take a quick break so I can get some water. Y'all hold tight. Texas freaking oak and cedar kicking my butt. Alright. Miss Girl asked because I couldn't get into women's studies. No. Because I was on super academic probation with a GPA of 1.1. I joined the military and I had a great career. Still do. And over this last year, I've had a chance to kind of go back and reflect on all of my life experiences in my first year living as my true self. The more I think about it, the more I remember all of my confirming experiences, all the things that I did that felt like they were natural to me throughout my entire life. I've had a lot of discussions with people that have known me throughout my life that still decided to be a part of, well, my new life. And some of those folks I served with in the military have been quite supportive and very vocal about the time that they got to spend with me. I've had discussions with several people who were like, wow, you hid it really well. And I was like, well, maybe, but did I though? Did I really hide it that well? And they had to sit back and they had to think about it too. And they're like, well, now that I really narrow it down, no, you didn't. Like, you looked like you were always trying to force this gruff demeanor, this forced sadness or this forced anger, the whole NCO stare and everything. And I was like, yeah, it felt forced. It felt very forced. Miss Girl, now why on earth would you follow me if you're in here harassing me? That makes no sense. Duh. I don't need that kind of people following me. It's always been very interesting, intriguing even, to have people, well, remember me. And by me, I mean me. The brief moments that I would sneak out, creep through the mask that I presented with most of my life. It's nice to know that I was always there. And looking back at my 1 year of transitioning and all of the amazing changes and all of this wonderful, wonderful stuff that's been happening, and I wouldn't change it for the world. I would never, ever go back to being something I wasn't because it made other people more comfortable. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't care about my friends or that I don't care about my family and how they feel. I do. I obviously do. I think it's important to garnish good relationships with people. But what I can't do is lie to myself, because that lie just happens to make other people more comfortable. After a year of living my true reality, my true identity, it's been so liberating. And although, yes, I do get hate, I get hate all of the time, I think it's far and few between compared to the support. Even here in Texas. Texas has proposed some pretty awful bills. Yes, they have. And even taken some very awful executive actions. And I don't live in a major city like Austin or Dallas or Houston or El Paso or even San Antonio. I live in a very small, very rural community. I live in a house that's over 120 years old. I live on 5 acres. We've got animals. We've got all that. And yep, still trans. So it makes no difference. It's not a city issue. It's not a Democrat stronghold issue. It's not a liberal issue. It's not a conservative issue. Being trans is an everything issue. But only if you take it that way. I don't care where you come from, how prestigious your private school was, how religious your upbringing was. I went to church twice a week, every week, my entire childhood. Wednesdays and Sundays, I was at church for 3 hours, learning about God and how to be a good, upstanding young man. Well, I am a good and upstanding young person. I've made a great life for myself and those around me. I'm quite successful. I'll retire from military service. I'll have my businesses and my business income. Although you can't see them, there's tons of degrees hanging on the wall. Most of those are mine. Hi, Skit. Hi, Carter. You guys are in the Q&A portion of my video, so... Although I don't see a lot of people asking questions on my other platforms, so we're going to turn the chat overlay off because it eats up half of my screen. All in all, I'd say that this year in reflection has been good. Even here in this little podunk town, the people who've been kind to me post-transition, especially those that knew me pre-transition, do outnumber the ones that have not been. And I think that says something about us as a society as a whole. Even here, in what I would consider to be a conservative message, small town America, very, very religious people. Yeah. They've been nicer to me than I ever thought was possible. Now, do I get a lot of mean people here? Absolutely. I lost an untold number of customers for my local business when they found out. But I kept a lot more and made some new ones. So yeah, I think the good-hearted, well-rounded, intelligent-natured part of American society still is the majority. And over this last year, the biggest things that I can learn and take away, that I want to share with everyone else, is that once you defeat ignorance, once you remove people's ignorant tendencies, the talking heads that, well, spread ignorance and sometimes stupidity, when you take those things out of the equation because you are arming people with the ability to make conscious decisions for themselves with real evidence and real facts, and just decency in general, they will. Even the oldest generations that are still out there being a part of society along with the rest of us are embracing the differences we all have. I've learned of so many people here in my little town and community who are well into their 80s who talk about their grandparents and then their grandparents' grandparents having what would be today called transgendered siblings. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 30s and 20s, the late 1800s even. They've got pictures, and it made me cry. Transgenderism, or whatever dumbass name people want to give it, isn't new. We've been around forever. We're not a mistake. We're not some anomaly. Aw, thank you, Randy. Delina asks, for those people who don't know how but want to love and show support, what's a good start? Good question, Delina. I like that question. The easiest thing any human being can do to show love and support for someone who is, well, different. Doesn't matter. Gay, straight, trans, bi, pan, whatever. Just be open. It's okay to be uncomfortable. It is okay to be uncomfortable. There's no rule that says that you're not allowed to be uncomfortable around people who are different. Just don't allow your discomfort to dictate negative reactions to the people who make you uncomfortable. That's it. Ask questions, but the best thing for you to do to be helpful and supportive is go do your research. Your trans kids or your trans friends or your trans siblings are not an encyclopedia, and they don't owe you a definition or an explanation. Educate yourself. Talk to them. Ask them how they're feeling. What are they currently dealing with? How can you help? You know, the same thing you would do for anybody else, I would hope. Oh, Randy, I mean, I get where you're coming from. And no, we shouldn't. Whether you're cisgendered, transgendered, whatever, we shouldn't, well, no one should give a damn what anybody else thinks. It's not our place. It's not your place. It's okay to be indifferent amongst things. But we don't need to be just as hateful as the people who bring our entire community down and marginalize us in the first place. There's no reason for that. You know, when I came out to my parents, I wasn't young. Hell, I waited until I was 40 to come out to my parents. It was still hard. And my parents didn't take it well at first. But my parents definitely did the right thing. They went and they got educated. They went and talked to doctors and scientists and therapists and asked them, what does all of this mean? Did I fuck up as a parent? Did I cause this? I didn't talk to my mom after I came out for weeks. That's because she was bracing herself, educating herself, learning, I'm sure, asking lots of questions. And she realized she didn't do this. She didn't fuck up. I just am. And when she accepted that, it made her happy. She saw me now as her daughter. My mom has never been happy. Never been happy until now. And as I prepare for my first round of gender confirming surgeries, in this case facial feminization surgery, my mom's coming down to spend that time with me and my children. Hey, what's up?
Justin's coming now.
Okay. Thank you. Randy, I'm very sorry to hear that. Losing a parent is difficult. It's probably one of the hardest things that we'll ever do in our lives. In the previous case before, yeah, waiting till 70 after both your parents have passed, you kind of robbed your parents of the opportunity to embrace your life and your true identity with you. But I understand why. I understand why they waited. I almost did too. But I'm glad. I've told a lot of friends and family. I came out quite publicly, if you will. Did I lose people? You bet your ass I did. Do those people matter anymore? No, they don't. They probably never mattered to begin with. If they can't accept me now, they could accept the lie. They weren't good people to begin with, and I don't need to waste time. But that's what we all face. All in all, this last year for me, 1 full year, now 1 full year and a day or two, of being my real self, living my real life on hormones. All the awesome changes have been amazing for me. It's been a good year. Season for my show. So many things to talk about. So many new people to meet and interview. It's been great. And I am very glad I got an opportunity to enjoy this all with you. My listeners on Spotify, my viewers on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch, all of my followers on TikTok, Tumblr, Instagram, have all gotten a chance to share this journey with me. And I appreciate every last one of you. It takes a lot. It takes a lot to share a journey with somebody you don't know. And even more to share a journey with someone that maybe you don't necessarily understand. Mr. Kevy, the show's called Trans Confessions, a very queer journey. It is on YouTube, pretty easy to find. Or just go to my website. All my social media links are on my website. If you're watching me on TikTok, then you can actually go to my profile. I've got a link tree in it that links to everything. So watch me on your favorite platform. Of course, when this show's over, everything's on my website. You can watch it on demand. It's pretty cool. Now, all that being said, I've got 1 episode remaining, and that episode is going to be Friday. I'm going to skip Wednesday this week because I will be in San Antonio doing my pre-surgery appointments, and then Friday will be it. Friday will be the last show, episode 25. Season 1 is coming to a close. That means I will not be back live again doing my show until August. But in August, we'll have a lot more guests. We'll be doing a lot more fun location stuff. I'll be in Georgia. So please join me this Friday, 11:30 Central Standard Time, or roughly thereabouts, and for my last show of the season. Thank you all for joining me, and thank you for making this the best first season it could be. Until next time, I'll see you all really soon.